Hi guys, Brian from Boas here. A lot of you guys have been asking me about Argentine boas lately, and as these are one of my favorite boa, I thought today I'd show you my entire group of Argentine boas, as well as discuss my future breeding plans for these beautiful animals. If you're new to the channel, this is the place for information about all aspects of keeping and breeding boa constrictors in captivity. So if you want to learn all about these amazing animals, make sure to subscribe to Brian Boas. There's definitely been a surge in the popularity of Argentine boas over the last few years, and unfortunately it doesn't seem like there's very few people working with them right now. There's not a whole lot of babies available, so as a result the prices have really skyrocketed. I remember back around maybe 10-15 years ago, Argentine boas were available pretty readily, and the prices were hardly any higher than just the normal common, pet store type Colombian boa. But in the last few years they've really shot up in price, and right now on the online classifieds for reptiles, the asking prices are anywhere from around $800 to $1,000, so quite a bit higher than they were in the past. As I've mentioned before in my other videos, Argentine boas are definitely one of my favorite localities. It may well even be the single #1 favorite of mine, although it's obviously very difficult to pick a favorite. Argentine boas are special to me for several reasons. They're the first type of locality boa that I ever had as a pet, and they're also the first type of boa that I bred. And I had a pair of them that I bred several times. This is back when I was kind of more of a hobbyist, not really a serious breeder. My original pair of Argentine boas that I got back in the 90s unfortunately passed away on me a few years ago, and they were in their 20s, so they were getting pretty old. And they were probably the largest boas I've had. They were around 8.5 or 9 feet long, so pretty good sized boas. And they had their last litter in 2015, a small litter. I have 3 holdback females from that litter, and so this is one of them. And this animal shows the beautiful dark coloration, which is what drew me to Argentine boas to begin with. They're definitely different than most of the other types of boas. So they have this beautiful black or dark chocolate brown coloration. The markings are either white or like kind of an off-white yellowish. They often have this kind of creamy mocha, light tan markings as well. And in addition, the saddles are kind of more broken up. They have kind of a less distinct saddle pattern. It's kind of more almost like a network type of pattern. You can see the saddles, but they're definitely less well defined. So a really cool pattern. And so this animal has kind of a dark chocolate brown coloration. You can see, looking at her head, they also have some really cool head markings on these Argentine boas. The Argentine boas, they're not quite as heavily bodied as the true red tails, and some of the other types of boas are a little more elongated. This particular animal is now 5.5 years old, so she's probably about ready to breed. So I don't have any pairings this year. I don't have a male who's ready to go, but this female is probably about ready to breed. And what strikes me about this female is that her markings almost look like when you look up at the night sky and you see all the little pinpricks of light that look like the stars and galaxies and star clusters. Just a really cool coloration. Argentine boas, I found, are pretty laid back. If you read the literature, especially some of the older books, there's a lot of claims that these animals can be aggressive and they're hissy, and I found that that's really not true. Although the babies do hiss quite a bit, they almost never strike. It's all a bluff, and they're really not an aggressive type of boa. And my adults, like this one, are usually pretty laid back and pretty easy to handle. So definitely a cool boa, both as a pet and a beautiful animal to look at. Here's another 2015 holdback female Argentine boa. And so this particular animal, you'll notice she's quite a bit darker than the female I just showed you, her sister. She just has, a darker pattern. And my original pair, the male was darker, and he had a much less distinctive pattern. He was kind of more black overall. While the female that I had was kind of a dark chocolatey brown color with kind of creamy mocha type saddle markings. And so this female looks more like the original male based on her color. You can see she also has more of a well-defined saddle pattern than the female that I just showed you. And this particular animal, you can see she's quite a bit smaller than the female I just showed you, or the other female that I'll show you next. As I mentioned before, even within the same litter, litter mates will just grow at different rates. So as long as you're feeding a healthy feeding schedule, you don't have to worry if some of your boas are growing faster than others. So this particular female, she's probably not quite ready to breed. I probably would wait at least another year for this female. But as I mentioned, I don't have any pairings ready for this year. Anyway, so it's kind of a moot point because I don't have a male that's ready to go. You can see this female not only has the circular markings going down her back, but also if you look at her side, she's got these kind of cool whitish circular markings. So the pattern of Argentine boas is definitely one of the most distinctive patterns of any locality boa. And if you count up the saddles, they tend to have a high saddle count, somewhere in the upper 20s. But the saddles are really broken up, so sometimes you can't even really make out the saddles all that well. Just a really cool look to a boa. This is the last of the 2015 females that I have. So this one she's about the same size as the first one I showed you, so she's probably around 6.5 feet. And her coloration is kind of intermediate between the two that I showed you. So she's not quite as dark as the one I just showed you, but she's more dark than the first one. The first one is kind of more of a brownish, and this female is kind of more of a very dark brown up at the top, and then her sides are kind of a medium brown. And then you look at her belly, it's kind of the lightest. It's kind of a medium brown with a lot of white flecking. And so she shows the characteristic pattern of the Argentine boas where the saddles kind of blend together and with lots of white flecking, and the saddles become less and less distinct as they get bigger. Interestingly, when they're first born, they have a pretty well-defined saddle pattern, and then the pattern fades over time until as adults they often don't have any of that saddle pattern left. It's just this more irregular pattern of white flecks and white markings. So I'm going to show you some younger Argentine boas in a minute, but these younger animals have a better well-defined saddle pattern. But you can't judge what the adult is going to look like from the pattern of the babies. So if you're going to buy an Argentine boa and you want a better idea what they might look like, make sure you ask to see some pictures of the adult breeders, because your babies will typically have more well-defined saddles. Babies will also typically have quite a bit of pink coloration, which typically fades by the first year or two of life. There is one line of Argentine boas, however, that retain their pink coloration. And I was lucky to acquire an animal from this line just this last year. This is called the Max Pink bloodline. And this is a bloodline that was developed by Bob Guerre, who's been breeding animals to retain pink for a number of generations. And as a result, the adults retain a lot of the pink color like this male. So the pink, as you can see, is kind of more of a dark chocolatey reddish pink, really beautiful coloration. And this particular animal is around 2.5 years old, and I hope that he'll be ready for breeding next year. I could potentially pair him up with one of my larger 2015 females. This is a 2018 male. And so I want to show you close up some of his markings, just because not only does he have the beautiful pink coloration, but he's got a really distinctive pattern. So I'm going to get out my close-up lens and show you some close-ups of this guy. So here's a close-up of the Max Pink bloodline male. And you can see the defining characteristic of this bloodline is he's got these dark pinkish blotches in the middle of each saddle. And they're not really pink. It's almost like a dark salmon red, almost like a chocolatey color. But, it's just a very beautiful look. So the other thing that I really like about this animal and this bloodline is you can see, looking at his side pattern, he's got this beautiful pattern of these kind of semicircles and this kind of linear looking pattern. This guy is about 2.5 years old, so we'll have to see how it maybe it becomes less distinctive with age. But just a really beautiful look. And that was the first thing that struck me when I got this animal, besides the pink coloration. So the Max Pink, it's not like a morph, it's not like a dominant recessive type of thing. It's just kind of a selectively bred bloodline for animals that retain this coloration into adulthood. And if you cross a Max Pink with a normal Argentine boa, basically you'll get animals that are kind of intermediate. They have, more pink than usual, but not quite as much as this, full bloodline Max Pink animal. Although, of course, there'd be some variability. So the other thing that this guy is kind of showing you is Argentine boas are typically a pretty chill animal. You can see he's not really trying to get away. He's just kind of hanging out and exploring. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're such a popular, locality boa to keep as a pet. Before we move on to the next boa, I thought I'd just leave you with this close-up shot of this head of this Max Pink animal, just so you can see how beautiful his markings are. So I have one more pair of Argentine boas. This is a pair born in 2019 that I got as babies and I'm raising up. And this is the female. And so you can see she still has pretty well defined saddles, so they haven't quite faded out yet like what we saw with the older females. This animal also, you can see she's got kind of more of a straight black and white look to her, less of the cream, kind of the creamy mocha colors that we see in some of my older females. Just a beautiful animal. A lot of cool markings. You can see her head markings have this great look to them. But just a really cool look overall. And this animal, of course, is still quite a ways away from breeding. With the females, typically you want them to be at least around 5 years old. The males can often breed a couple of years younger, but the females, it's really important that they're quite large before breeding. There's a close-up of her head, just showing you some of the intricate patterns of the markings that she's got on her head. And every boa, every Argentine boa, seems to have a slightly different head markings, almost like a fingerprint. Really cool to look at. And the last Argentine I want to show you today is the male from that 2019 pair. So you can see he looks pretty similar to the female, as they're litter mates, but he's got kind of more of a straight black and white look, a lot of cool shades of gray in there. And I showed you the Max Pink animal. There are other breeders who are working with these Argentines to get a really dark animal. I've seen some bloodlines that are almost pure black with just a few little white flecks. And then there's also some high white bloodlines. I know Bob from Ancient Reproductions also has a high white bloodline that he's working on. So you might want to check that out if you like the high white look. A lot of like really nice clean white markings on a dark black background. But you really can't go wrong with any of these different looks. They're all kind of beautiful in their own way. Just wish there were more of these available, and hopefully we'll have more people breeding these in the next few years so everybody can enjoy these beautiful constrictors. So that was a look at my Argentine boa group. And as I mentioned, I don't have any pairings this year, but hopefully I should have a pairing next year. Possibly this Max Pink male with one of my 2015 females, if everything goes according to plan. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop me a line. Thanks for watching and enjoy your boas.